Hi, welcome to this talk. This talk is about the ethics, care, and collaboration in establishing the Bethlem Gallery art collection. I'm Amisha. Between November 2022 and March 2025, I worked with Bethlem Gallery to establish their first permanent art collection and worked as the gallery's first collection curator. Today, I want to take you through how the collection came into being, not just as a project, but as a piece of ethical and emotional work inside the grounds of Bethlem Royal Hospital in Beckenham, London. The collection is shaped by artists, by people with lived experience of mental health services, by staff across the NHS Trust, and by the community partners in local boroughs. Working in this way meant that collecting wasn't simply about selecting artworks. It became a way of asking questions about responsibility, care, and who actually gets to shape the cultural record within a clinical institution. The project was supported by the Peter Sowerby Foundation and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and that gave us the room to explore what care-focused model of contemporary collecting might look like in practice. Our intention was to bring art into NHS and community settings in a way that genuinely supported well-being and belonging. We wanted a collection that could stay responsive and ethical, one shaped by lived experience and grounded in ideas of equity and care. We also wanted artists' voice to be present in clinical and community spaces in a way that challenges stigma. It was never about using art as a tool, but about recognizing artists as leaders in changing how mental health is seen and understood. And co-creation was central. We weren't trying to add a participatory layer to a traditional structure. We wanted to see how shared decision making might actually shift the process itself. The objectives were clear and ambitious. Build a sustainable collection for the NHS Trust, set up and support a new advisory board, create a whole policy framework from scratch, acquire and interpret over 100 artworks, and launch a public catalogue and an exhibition. Behind all that sat a deeper question. Could a collection be shaped from the ground up through lived experience, not consulted, but held as expertise? To make this real, we worked with a new advisory board. We held more than 10 sessions, and every major decision ran through the group. What we drafted together was the collection development policy, the care and conservation plan, the documentation plan, and the interpretation and display policy. We brought in artists, we brought in colleagues from Cursor Arts, the Museum of Mind, and external heritage specialists when we needed more voices around the table. Some of the most revealing conversations happened during site visits to secure and clinical settings. Seeing whether works might live, how patients, staff, and families move through those spaces changed how we thought about display, interpretation, and visibility. Decisions suddenly became more relational and more human. There were challenges along the way. The challenges were much more philosophical as they were practical. Integrating lived experience with curatorial frameworks meant finding a shared language for expertise. It required care, patience, and a willingness to let go of the way things are usually done. Questions around representation and display were particularly complex. Consent wasn't always straightforward. Visibility can empower, but it can also expose, and the line between those two isn't fixed. We co created ethical guidelines because we realized no single person should hold that responsibility alone. The scale was bigger than expected. We uncovered roughly 9,000 artworks in storage, not the 300 that we anticipated. That meant adjusting the plan, redeploying funding, and bringing in an assistant curator and volunteers. And then there was the very real pressure of time. A compressed schedule, heavy admin, funding deadlines, clear and consistent communication held the project together through all of that. By the time the collection was launched earlier this year, we had accessioned 170 artworks and co-produced four major policies. The launch exhibition marked the moment the collection finally became public, but the real impact was in the people who shaped it. Advisory board members spoke about gaining confidence, communication skills, and a deeper understanding of ethical decision making. Some said that they felt valued as equals and that their lived experience was suddenly taken seriously, not just as an add-on. The project was recognized as an example of inclusive collecting practice, and perhaps most importantly, the advisory board continues as a steering body beyond the end of my role, a sign that shared governance has become part of the gallery's fabric, not just a project phase. Working with lived experience at the centre changed the rhythm of the work. It meant slowing down and listening in different ways. Expertise surfaced in many forms, and part of that job was recognizing that. Ethical questions showed up in small moments. A hesitation about visibility, uncertainty about how to hold a deeper personal artwork in permanent record. The emotional weight was present throughout. Some conversations were heavy, but that emotional honesty shaped better decisions. Care wasn't just about a care wasn't just something applied to artworks. It was part of how we worked with one another. Professional standards didn't disappear, they shifted. They became tools we could adapt together rather than rules handed down. More than anything, I learned that collaboration isn't a technique, it's a commitment. You stay with the complexity rather than rushing to tidy answers. The launch of the collection isn't an ending. It marks the beginning of a different kind of stewardship of care, consent, and shared authority to remain active. The advisory board continuing beyond my role is significant. It signals a shift in how the gallery understands responsibility, not just to the artworks, but to the artists and those who encounter the works in clinical and public settings. What we've built together needs tending. Policies, relationships, practices will evolve, and staying responsive to that change is part of the commitment we made by working in this way. At its heart, the project shows that institutions, in varying sizes and complexity, can evolve when care shapes the structure and not just the sentiment. What we now have is a framework for a co-produced collection at Bethlem Gallery, one that strengthens governance, challenges assumptions about inclusion, and broadens our understanding of what contemporary collecting can look like outside traditional museum settings. A member of the advisory board said something that stayed with me. This project has shown how shared decision making and ethical care can redefine what the collection stands for. It's not about preservation, but about listening. And that, I think, is the clearest summary of what this work has become. Thank you.